I'd like to call this House to order as we debate the motion. This House believes that Internet access should be a basic human right. At this point in time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Prime Minister, who will introduce us to the topic with a speech not to exceed 7 minutes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this demonstration debate. I hope you're all well fed, but not too well fed as to be sleepy. We'll try to do a little bit. Josh's department is to wake you up. Today we're going to defend the fact that the internet is a basic human right. And we're going to talk about the freedom to access information on the internet, to access anything that you want, and to create information as much as you want. So this is not a debate about how much internet, as in how many computers we have in the world, but how much of the internet you can access. Basically a debate about censorship, and a debate that we believe is important and relevant. We think this debate applies to the entire world, but we're going to talk about China, because we are in China and we think that's important. That's pretty cool. So we defend a free internet without limitations. Because we believe that it is an extension of the basic rights that people already have and the basic rights that people should have. I'm going to talk about this on a more individual level. I'm going to talk about why this is free, like the freedom to speak, like the freedom to develop your identity, and like the freedom to associate. And I'm going to talk about why this should be a free right, even when other physical rights may not be as free in society. These freedoms are still real. My second speaker will talk about how this is a societal right, how he develops the societal identity and actions, and he's going to talk about some things more from the specific Chinese perspective, because he's Chinese. So moving on, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the right to information and why this should be a free right. We think people accessing the internet should have the freedom to create anything and to access anything as they want. This is not about having the same kind of information in a different way. So if I can access Badu, then I don't need to access Google. If I can access local information, I don't need to access international information. We think it should be up to the individual to decide the quality and value of information, because each individual is different, because each individual is distinct. And we think the value of that information today is a whole lot more powerful because of the role that information plays in society. So we don't think this is about those alternatives. We don't think, no thank you, you can say what is important for someone and what is not important for someone. Now I'm going to talk about that on 3 levels. Firstly, I think information and the internet helps people define their identity. It helps you know the kind of person that you are or the kind of person that you want to be. Because the internet, number one, helps you find information that you may not have found in local society. For example, information to do with my ethnicity, or increasingly information to do with my sexuality. If I feel that I have a different sexuality, I can find that sexuality or information to support those ideas on the internet, but not on other places. I may also help find other people of similar inclinations, of a similar ethnicity if I'm separated from my ethnic group, or if I have a different sexuality, or a different ideology. It helps me express, and through that expression, in a minute Jess, through that expression help define my identity further. And we think that this is an individual right that every human being should have, to find out their place and how they want to feel as a person in society. Yes, ma'am?
Logan, how is speech inciting people to racial hatred ever important to defining your identity?
We think on 2 levels. One, as a racist, I think I still have that right to be racist, and a right to, if my ideology or my culture, or if I think that of a certain person of a certain ethnic group is of a certain characteristic, that may be my own way I've created my logical assumptions, or it may be an extension of my culture or what I've been told. Now, not to say whether those things are right or wrong, but those things form an integral part of my identity. As someone else on the other side, they have a right to see those things, or they have a right to respond to those ideas. We don't remove those ideas from society just by saying that we cannot express them, and thank you for bringing them up and acknowledging that those ideas do exist. The question is, by repressing those ideas, do you necessarily push them away, or you give them more value? We think you do not help people develop this identity. That's wrong. Secondly, we said the internet helps ensure social mobility. It helps people move and develop themselves in society by deciding myself what information I want to get to improve myself, to learn about things, or to emphasize myself beyond conventional means and beyond conventional media. We think the internet provides far more freedoms to the individual. And if you say as an individual in society, you have the right to develop yourself, and the internet helps you do that so much more than anything else in society. Then we say, by extension, the internet is a fundamental human right. And we also say the internet helps protect you. It protects you by knowing what you can, learning how to do things in society. If there is someone who's inciting racial hatred on the internet, it's important for me to know who these people are, what this form of racial hatred is, in order for me to protect myself, and we think those things apply. So, and we say especially when you cannot get those things within conventional media. And therefore, and that makes the internet all that more powerful. Before I move on to the freedom of internet, and even in a more restrictive society, I'll take one from closing, and closing as a point.
Yes, sir. All of these things are great. How is the internet, how is this totally unique to the internet, meaning that they cannot be accomplished through any other means?
I've just told you how it's easy to find information when that information doesn't exist. Like if I'm of a specific, say I'm homosexual, and it's not really cool to come out and tell everybody else you're homosexual because that's what my society feels like. I can find information that encourages that, or at least helps me explore that idea on the internet, and we think that's unique. But secondly, we say even in, and this goes nicely into the second part of my development, even in a more restrictive society where information is more restricted, we think the internet makes it more real on two levels. One, we say that if you think that the reason why we're restricting the movement of people or the right of people to associate or form groups in society is because they can cause harm, we think it's much harder to do the same things on the internet. The harms that someone's going to have by like shouting at somebody else or preaching in front of a large group of people or forming a small insurgent group is not going to be the same as forming those things on the internet. We think those freedoms there should be more acceptable. But secondly, we say if we are talking about existence in a more restrictive society where people are either more restrictive because of law or more restrictive because of their culture, because they don't want to share information as much, or worried about what other people may think about their ideas or their feelings, then we say access to the internet is more important, because you can find this information from people who are far away from you. And you can find this information without disclosing yourself. You can develop your identity on the internet without having to sacrifice your identity in the real world. And we say that, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is a fundamental human right. So what have we done for you today from opening government? We've told you how we supported internet without limitations. And we've told you firstly that this is a right just like the right of somebody to freely express themselves, because it's important to develop their identity, it's important to develop social mobility, and it helps to protect you, which we think are all fundamental rights. And we said even in a society, especially in a society that's more restrictive, this right is real. So we from opening government, ladies and gentlemen, are very happy to support the internet as a basic human right.
We thank the Prime Minister for that introduction to the debate, and now we invite the Leader of the Opposition to introduce the opposition case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On first opposition today, we strongly believe that free societies and healthy societies set limits on what their citizens can do all the time, and we think it's entirely appropriate to extend that principle to the internet, given that we do it everywhere else and it works pretty well, Mr. Speaker. We force individuals to serve on juries, we force them to wear seatbelts, and yes, in some countries, we don't let you smoke in public places. We think that having these sorts of rules is absolutely fine, Mr. Speaker, and we would extend this principle of preventing harm to other people and maximizing individuals' freedom in the venue of the internet in the same way that we do in other fora. We think it's important at the start of this debate, though, Mr. Speaker, to emphasize that we are really talking about marginal cases in this debate. In the vast majority of speech situations on the internet, both sides of the House will agree that it's a great idea for lots of things to be discussed and a lot of people to talk about lots of different ideas. All we have to prove to you on side opposition to win this debate is that there are certain rare, extreme, and very harmful situations in which things can be said or displayed on the internet that ought not to be seen or expressed by people. And that's what we're going to do, and that's why Opposition Bench will win this debate, specifically in the first half. But before I go and do that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give you some of the response to what we've heard so far from Logan. We heard basically three main things. Firstly, he talked to us about this right to information, and he told us basically that individuals should have the right to define their own identity, that you should be able to decide the value of information for yourself, because it's a part of the identity creation process, Mr. Speaker? Well, first of all, we just think that there is some information that is not in any way valuable to that process. We don't think that the existence of child pornography on the internet is going to be an important part of many people's identity formation process. And even if it is, as Logan said, he said that racist information is important to the identity formation process of a racist, we think that the government, shockingly, should take a stance against that, Mr. Speaker. We don't think the government should be facilitating or encouraging the creation of racist identities within its citizens. And then Logan said in response to this, and in response to my point of information, that, well, it's important that we have that speech out there because then we can counteract it, Mr. Speaker. We can rebut it in an open public space. Well, I have three responses to that, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, sometimes that just doesn't happen, right? Sometimes there is really harmful speech on the internet, and there is no appropriate or reasonable response. Secondly, sometimes there is a response, but the individual who is initially exposed to that harmful speech is not then subsequently exposed to the response. So it isn't neutralized for them, Mr. Speaker. The impact of that speech is that it's still there. Thirdly, even if there is a response and the same individual is exposed to both, sometimes the damage is already done, Mr. Speaker. And we see this all the time in cases of defamation. I can say something very, very harmful about Logan and tell everybody he's a pedophile, and Logan can come back and say, no, I'm not a pedophile. But if Logan is running for political office, the damage has already been done, Mr. Speaker. A lot of people already think he's a pedophile, and they don't care that he said that he isn't. And so we don't think that this neutralization process that Logan was talking about already works. I need to be quick, Mr. Speaker, because I always spend too much time on rebuttal, and this is a good learning opportunity for you guys. Don't do this in your first opposition speech. The second thing that Logan talked about was social mobility, and he said the internet's really great at giving people a leg up. Well, this might be true, Mr. Speaker, but this has to be balanced against other considerations. Like, I might get social mobility by being a drug dealer, but that doesn't mean that the government should let me deal drugs. We need to consider the harms of other people's actions, and the fact that we really are talking about marginal cases, and I'll take you in a second, sir. But the final thing Logan talked to you about was sort of the nature of the internet as being secretive and allowing me to explore my identity in ways that I can't physically out in the public. My second argument will deal directly with this. Yes, Logan?
Jess, you talked about harm and why it's fair to limit when it's harmful, but would you consider sedition against the government, criticizing the government as harm as a basis to censor the internet?
Okay, so I'm actually going to talk about this a little bit in my first argument, so I'm going to wiggle out of that by discussing it in my substantive matter. And again, I should have given you my team split beforehand, so this is very bad of me. But there are four things we're going to talk to you about in opening opposition. The first thing I want to talk about is sort of the dangers and harms of absolute free speech. The second is about why especially we think the internet is something that should be subject to censorship. And my partner Shako is going to have two further arguments. She's going to give you a little bit of rights analysis, and why we don't really think the notion of rights is something we should be applying to a commodity like the internet. The final thing she's going to talk to you about is government sending clear moral messages, and why the government has a duty to do that. So the first thing I will talk to you about, Mr. Speaker, is the harms of absolute free speech. Because we do think that in a lot of cases, firstly, there's some speech that just has no value at all, so we don't even have to do a cost-benefit analysis. We would put sort of speech that incites people to racial hatred against other racial groups under that. We would put child pornography under that. We don't think that speech has any value at all, and these guys need to give us a justification for why that's valuable. But moreover, we think there's some speech that might have some value, no thanks Josh, but that when we weigh it up against the potential harms of that speech on society, we need to censor it for that reason. And under that, I would put things like, not necessarily, I wouldn't use the word sedition, but speech that would have national security implications. And the example that I would give here is the ability of American journalists in Iraq and Afghanistan to report on what's happening there. We don't think it is appropriate, and it's not appropriate, for a journalist to say where American troops are, or which American soldiers have died after they've died and before their families have been notified. We think that is clearly an infringement on free speech, but we think it's a necessary one for the national security of American troops in the Middle East, and also for the dignity and respect of the families of the deceased. We think that's a really important principle. The second thing I'd like to say under this is just allowing certain speech to exist legitimizes it and exposes people to it. And I refer you back to my rebuttal analysis about why Logan's mechanism, no thank you guys, of just responding to it doesn't always work. There's harm in defamation that can't necessarily be neutralized in rebuttal. There's harm of hate speech. Individuals feel marginalized. They don't want to engage in society, and it doesn't matter that maybe other people have come back and said that that speech was damaging, because they already feel like the damage has been done to them. They know that there are people out there who hate them, and they feel the effects of it. The final thing I'd briefly like to address to this House is why we think the internet particularly needs to be subject to certain limits. We think that firstly, the fact that anybody can post anything on the internet and that there's no editorial filter is an important consideration. The internet isn't like the BBC, it's not like the New York Times, there isn't a certain quality control for what's out there. We think given the fact that anybody anybody can post anything means that sometimes we need to check that. Secondly, the anonymity of the internet is similarly a problem. We don't always have accountability in terms of who's posting stuff, and so people feel more able to post crazy, ridiculous things because they know that their names aren't being attached to them. And we think that means that oftentimes there's more of a need for censorship. And the final reason why we think the internet particularly needs to be checked is because of the greater potential exposure of information that's posted on the web. We think that the possibility of harm is so much greater because if I put a video on YouTube, within 24 hours, literally millions of people could have seen that. We don't have that with national newspapers and with books. And we think for that reason, governments need to protect individuals, they need to protect society, and they need to censor the internet. Thank you very much.
We thank the Leader of the Opposition for her remarks, and now we invite the Deputy Prime Minister to extend upon his partner's remarks.
Okay, before I go further on the uniqueness of the internet in contributing to the freedom access of information and to the external and internal benefits for netizens within their countries, I want to do several rebuttals on just points. The first is the argument of lots of harm, potential harm on censorship, but there is a great vagueness within the mechanism of censorship. Who to determine what kind of potential harm is there? We have countries and governments, in the name of national security, blocking the opposition party, depressing their people, oppressing those people, and just calling them as marginal cases, single case. We got here in China 1/5 of the population of the whole world, and we got the biggest great firewall in the country. We cannot access Facebook, we cannot access Twitter, we cannot even access free information on Google and virtually almost every big net engines on the internet. They call it marginal cases, and that is definitely not marginal cases. The danger of the censorship endangering throughout the world, not only in those authoritarian countries, but also in European countries where people are getting censored on their daily speeches and no sense. And there's no way for government to determine what kind of potential harm inside. And on the other hand, there's internal way for the website to crack the authenticity of this information and the harm of information. For example, just mentioned, like, you can call Logan a pedophile, but you can call virtually every politician a pedophile. Why? Nobody believing that. First, anonymity. When you post the information anonymously, it reduces the trustness or reduces the trustworthy of those information. That's why some people you're not an idiot and go to the internet and solve every information they tell you. And second, we have a counter information. If you allow free information access, we do not censor certain kind of information. You allow people to engage in debate and engage in communication. When you call Logan a pedophile, there will be Logan's campaign office, spin doctors to say that Logan is not a pedophile. Oh, that's not the case. And that's how the internet information cracks those information. And if you censor like Logan's defense but allow just his post on pedophile, that actually creates injustice and unfairness of those issues.
But sir, you recognize that even if there is that response, oftentimes there's serious professional and financial damage done to Logan, regardless of the fact that there was a response.
That's virtually every argument the Chinese government used when they try to depress the country. You have no foreseeability to determine what kind of future harm is going to happen. Only after the case happens, oh, there has been a huge financial loss. But before those things happen, can you be smart enough to predict the 2007 financial crisis? Can you censor all kinds of information in case saying that, oh, there's going to be a financial crisis? I know it, so you cannot trade, you cannot buy stocks. That's absolutely authoritarian approach which we do not believe contribute to the basic human rights here. And second, I'd love to go to the racial hatred arguments and speeches. Like, if someone posts the arguments of racial hatred speech, on one hand, if they're speaking of nonsense, they're speaking of no value, it's just so, it has no impact, because it has no value, nobody can hear about that. If there has been some value and information inside it, there's some sort of reasonings or misguiding ideas that gonna incite a debate online with different communities exchange their ideas. Simply depressing the one hand of communication will only delay the problems into a future bigger problem in the physical world. If you cannot resolve the issue verbally on the internet, it's gonna one day lead to a physical fight or even worse than racial hatred and protest in the physical reality world, which lead to bigger problems in that sense. And now I'd love to go to my constructive speech on the first issue about uniqueness of the internet that was mentioned by Nick, on why internet is so specifically unique in contributing to the guarantee of the basic human rights. Yeah, we do not say that internet is the only way you can access information, but it's the cheapest, but virtually in China, like around the world, the cheapest way you can go to the internet bar, and no sense. The self-initiated way, which is completely different with print media. You cannot make a TV program for your own, you cannot hold a radio talk show by your own, but you can post a blog anytime, anywhere, as long as you can computer internet. That's the magic of internet, where you can self-initiate your own press, your own information, your own ideas, whatever, wherever. And that's unique, why internet can guarantee the freedom of expression and freedom of information around the world, regardless of your places and your economic incomes, and that's a guarantee to human rights universally. And secondly, on the external change on the internet can cover through and communicate people through the continent. Like in the previous cases, if I found myself a homosexual or gay in my own school, I cannot find any gay friend here in China, but through the internet talking, blogging, I can find, I found another gay Nick in Alaska, and we got connected, and then we have found that Josh was also part of us, and the way we established a community, but we are separated in different regions, but in that way, we get to communicate and link. That's how people get informed, connected, and associated throughout the geographical boundary, but get on the internet. That's what the internet helps us. When government try to block information, like the Chinese government, they block Google, they block Twitter, they block Facebook, but they got similar websites inside China. We got Baidu, we got Xiaonei, we got like microblogs, but those are completely different. Why? You got blocked from the outside world. You are like Korea, being confined in your own society, become closed to China. You can only exchange ideas in yourself, but you cannot know what happened outside the world where Chinese government don't want you to know. You cannot search lots of information happening around the world on Baidu. When you go to this website, in Chinese website, we go to Xiaonei, I think every people has an experience that your blog gets deleted by the Xiaonei managers. That's what's different from a freedom of expression in the websites. And that's why the Chinese own initiated websites are completely different from free, non-censored websites. And thirdly, the third argument is about how did internet politically and economically mobilize and connect people internally, like in the country. We have many kind of those examples, like in the Xiamen PX incident, when people got internet, they cannot protest legally in China, they cannot communicate legally, their phones got spied and they cannot talk to each other, but they can post anonymous posts on internet and calling people together outside the city government, outside City Hall for work. But actually a protest which organized and mobilized civil society in a way that was unprecedented in Chinese society. And Chinese netizens, those people posting online, has been a very crucial role in helping serving as check balance on government power. We get netizens finding out Nanking's real estate regulators very expensive watch, and they lead a corruption allegation against him. And that's what the government are not willing to face, and what the government, authoritarian government, are fearing. And by the mobilizing the netizens' work, that you can only from down to top initiate your own opinions and really mobilize, connect, associate, and achieve the guarantee of the basic human rights. That's why we use the internet every day. Thanks.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his contributions, and now we invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to conclude the first half of the debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, today the government is trying to promote us, our idealistic and crazy world with this free internet accessibility. First, I'm going to try to focus on their very first point right now. Everybody has the right to create free information and access to free information. And from this, I'm saying, no, you just don't have the right to create whatever you want. Such as I cannot go to Jinka to tell him in the face that Jinka, you're such a big fat ass. I don't want you to get out of here. Okay, until I'm seeing that I could not do that. And also for some American like coming to China, he has been already have an issue about people commenting on his fitness, on his figure all the day while he's in China. So people feel offended, when you say whatever you are trying to comment on what you want. So simply you cannot create or say whatever you want to say because it's simply not right. You will hurt people's feeling. And by hurting feeling, we say that it is detrimental because once the feeling is hurt, its damage have been brought, have been talked about by my previous speaker. Once the damage is done, there will be financial loss and also the physical loss and the connection and the trust and relationship you will lose between people like Fred and Sting come will forever hate me and have an opinion on me, and we don't want it to happen. And the second one, on the second point, I think that we'll be promoting social mobility because people can decide by themselves. Again, we're saying people cannot simply, the majority cannot decide by themselves. The majority need to be educated. We're looking at it here. What are the majority of the Chinese people? They are assuming the majority of Chinese people are just elite college students, as every one of us. We have the opinion, we have the ability to decide whether the information is valuable or not, because we already have so many education beforehand. But what about the countryside people? What about the people with limited education? They are the majority in Chinese society, and they simply cannot, they don't have enough knowledge, enough ability, and enough capability to decide what information is valuable. They simply believe whatever posted inside, whatever posted in front of them. So therefore this is hard, because the majority need to be educated, and by the censorship we're telling what is the right information you need to have and what is not right for you to do. Fat ass.
Are you saying that those living in the countryside does not deserve internet? Are you saying that we should ban internet bots in countryside and only allow them in city because those peasants are undereducated?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, he's misrepresenting the internet accessibility and the free internet accessibility. We are trying to, what we're arguing here is, we're not denying your ability to access the internet, but there is certain information you simply cannot get, and the certain information you simply cannot create. That's what the debate is about. It's not what about the internet accessibility. And the second one is saying that we will provide us identity to promote your identity. You will know yourself better. No, we're saying that it will actually create an identity crisis for the individual, because you will find this kind of information, invaluable information, and it will confuse you. And what you have been firmly believed for your previous whole lifetime turn out to be a joke, and this will actually be a detriment to people's psychology. Such as, I firmly believe that Taiwan and Tibet is just a part of China, but there will be the Taiwanese people came out to shout to me that will get out of Taiwan. Taiwan is not a part of it, and we will be hurt. And this kind of firm belief will be overthrown. And therefore my identity crisis will actually cause. And for what they are saying that the identity no more. What they're saying that the identity creation does not simply exist. On the other hand, the crisis of our identity will actually hurt. And the fourth one, lastly, Fred S. Jinkan is talking about this internet connection. Internet connection, people like to do it. And they say that it's okay to be racist, it's okay to be sexist, it's okay to be whatever you want. We're saying it's not. Because they're actually you have this free internet accessibility, you are providing people such as a KKK party, a free space for them to commit crime. We think that sexism is a crime, racism is a crime. We don't want people to commit their crime, because like this, we already received so much damage what the KKK party has to the minority in the United States society, and we sincerely don't want it to happen on the internet, because the internet is so widespread to everyone in the world, no more. And we're saying that like they're saying, what about we're finding our connected friend, we cannot simply find around us. So I have a question, they never explain how this long distance connection, such as a Chinese gay person and an Alaska gay person connecting on the cyberspace, will help this Chinese gay person help him out, take him out from the physical isolation situation in China. And so we're saying that this long distance internet connection simply does not bring that much benefits, but on the other hand, does not solve the problem. They bring it outside here. So we say for all this internet accessibility is just a thought and a lie and a joke, ladies and gentlemen. It's a crazy world they are drawing for us, but it's just some work. Now come back to my argument part. My argument part, my partner somehow we are trying to say there is the first one. It's a no legitimacy for internet to be a fundamental human right. Because when you say a fundamental human right, it's something that relates to your survival, such as water, shelter, food, etc. We're saying that without the internet, free internet accessibility, human beings have been lived for thousands of lives, and why everybody is here. So we say that internet accessibility is not something that directly relates to your own survival. We can survive quite well without free internet accessibility, and it's not like food, it's not like shelter, it's not like water. And we're saying that on the second hand, the internet is not a fundamental human right, but more of an internet is just a commodity. It's a luxury that we build by human society. With this luxury, we need to have devices like computers on the internet. And we also think government as always have the right to control access to commodity, such as you cannot pursue alcohol under 21-year-old, and you cannot smoke in a certain area. So government actually they indeed have the right to control the access of the commodity in order to protect the benefits of the public. And the second one, we're saying here is the government and the moral obligation of the governments to have this censorship, to have the internet censorship, because we know that the government have already taken a clear stand for you. There is a certain speech that is not acceptable in society. There are no value at all. We're trying to speech right. We're saying that the child pornography, sexism, racism, and hate speech, and this is something that we should never ever create or even see as ancestry. We need to eliminate all this information for good in this earth, and this is internet censorship that actually helping us on focusing on this goal, and we should help people to know where to go in the future, and people know it's always unacceptable. So freedom, we say freedom don't cross the line of harm, and ultimately free internet accessibility is not a fundamental human right. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
We thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and now we invite the member of the government to open the second half of the debate.
I had planned on intentionally making some mistakes so you guys knew what not to do, but I think the opening opposition did that for us, so I'm going to go ahead and do what I'm supposed to do now. Basically what they give us in the opposition is the dangers of the internet, and this is why we need to censor it. They said that some ideas need to be ignored and some ideas need to be rejected. Their underlying thesis to that is that the government knows how best to do this. Until Shako's speech, where apparently anybody without an education is dumb, anybody without an education can't understand that racism is a bad thing, they didn't give us a reason for why the government knows better than the average populace. Here on the closing government, we're going to tell you that the people should never relinquish control of information over to the government. No matter what other types of personal autonomy they're willing to hand over for a period of time, it should never relinquish the right to control over the information. Let's talk about a little bit of rebuttal what they said. Sorry. First of all, they talk about the harm. And I have to ask a question. At the end of Jess's speech, I was wondering, what's the harm of child pornography being on the internet? Like, if it's sitting on the internet, what is the harm? Unless people go and actively seek it out. If there's racism on the internet, what's the harm of it existing on the internet? Unless people go and actively seek it out, there is no harm to that. That's the idea about the internet. The idea about the internet is that it's passive. It doesn't proactively seek out victims. The internet does not knock on your door. Like, people don't accidentally come across pornography as much as they claim in The Office, right? Like, I was looking up the Constitution, and all of a sudden this kid was naked on my computer screen. Like, it was, I swear, I didn't do it intentionally, right? You have to actually look this information up. Now, what they might say, actually go ahead, POI, because I know what you're going to say. Go ahead, Jess.
Okay, so Josh, allowing it to exist on the internet means that people will create it, and we think that's really bad. And also, sometimes people who view child pornography are more likely to go and sexually assault children. We think that's really bad, too.
Right, well, exactly. That's what I thought you were going to say. So first of all, if they create it, once again, there's no harm to it. If they act on it, this is what you should have said in your speech. If they act on it, then we have a harm. But when somebody acts on it, that's when it's illegal. That's when we arrest people. That's when we stop people's actions. You can't arrest people for thinking. No matter what sort of crazy stuff goes through Logan's head, we can't arrest him, no matter what sort of crazy stuff goes Shako's head, until she slaps him. Then we can arrest her. I thought I was going to get close, but it didn't go that far, right? So, people are allowed to think. Information is allowed to be posted. There is no inherent harm to information being on the internet. There is no inherent seeking out of that information, looking for victims, and if people act on it, at that point we can do something about it. The next thing they talk about is information, and I actually have to ask the same question to them as Nick asked to us. He said, what's unique about the internet compared to other forms of media? We're going to answer that, but I have to ask them, under their idea of like defamation, what's unique about the internet compared to other forms of media? Because paparazzi defames people all of the time. With, apparently Jess thinks that the tabloid or the Gazette had this amazing editorial staff that makes sure that Bat Boy really did come down from Mars and really did land in Chicago. I don't think that's true. So when somebody is defamed on television, when somebody is defamed through the paparazzi, through the magazines, how is that any different than when it happens over the internet? The difference is on the internet, it's easier for people to respond. If the problem of the opposition side is that people have no way of responding to these allegations, how are you going to respond to a magazine? Are you going to write the editor and hope that out of the goodness of his heart he publishes it in the next episode? This is impossible. Anybody that's posted anything on the internet knows that you're going to have 100 responses of people telling you that you're stupid by the time you wake up the next morning. It's much easier for the responses that they want on the opposition side, under our side over here with the internet, as opposed to the media they talk about. No. So let's get to this idea of people not relinquishing control over information to the government. Because they said people can't handle it, right? But apparently the government. People can't handle it because they're dumb, but the government can handle it. I know she's Canadian and they're Chinese, so they probably never heard George Bush talk. But I don't think that the government is really the most intelligent group of people either. I think that the people, whether they're farmers or whether they're business leaders, I think that they're still just as intelligent as the government. I don't think that's the standard you can have. So what we would say is the only time that people can give away rights, the only time that people can sacrifice their personal autonomy is when they do it knowingly to a government that they've conceded to. And what we're going to tell you, what we have been telling you, is that the information on the internet, information that people have access to and need access to, is the only way to ensure that they are knowingly giving up their personal autonomy and that they are knowingly consenting to the government that they live under.
Sir, people are not knowingly giving up their personal autonomy. You're giving them extraneous autonomy and then saying that they have a right to that autonomy.
No, what I'm saying is if you... Okay, case. What I'm saying is that if you live inside of a country that perhaps might send people to Iraq to go to war, that's acceptable because you knowingly voted in that government, you know what they're doing, you know what their policies are, you've agreed to live under that government, and you have agreed to give up your personal autonomy should you be drafted, should you go to war. If you do not have information like what they talk about on the opposition side, if the government doesn't allow you to see caskets of dead soldiers coming home with American flags draped over them, you have not knowingly consented to anything. You have been fooled into consenting to a government. You've not given up your personal autonomy to something that you know is happening. This is what we can't stand for on the government side. The only way to ensure these things is through information. When you start allowing for the government to censor these sort of things, you can no longer make these decisions. And you won't just lose this right, but you'll lose all of the other rights that you allow for a government to take away from you, and you won't have a choice in doing it. Let's look at exactly what's unique about this, and answer the question why the internet then is specific to this. Because the internet actually circumvents the government, as opposed to the other types of media. The internet not only circumvents the governments, but the internet circumvents other powerful institutions that exist inside of society that we shouldn't have to listen to, that we shouldn't have to be fooled by. Jess gets up and she labels like different TV stations or different newspapers. I'm sorry, but I don't think that Fox News is the most credible, objective news source. But when Fox News is the people, or CNN, when these are the people that we get our information from, when the citizenry gets their information from, they're hearing information that has been diluted and biased by the government. The type of information you get on the internet comes from people exactly like you. It comes from people who are expressing their desire to allow for the entire citizenry to stand up. And when the government is doing something wrong, they say, we are going to tell you about it. It allows for them to circumvent the very government. On the opposition side, they seem to think that the government should have control over you. And your decision to allow the government control over you should be based on information that the government itself provides to you. That seems dumb. I think that if I'm going to make a decision to give somebody ultimate power over my life, it should be not based on information that they themselves have created. When George Bush tells us to go to war, I shouldn't make that decision based on the statistics that he gives me about war. The internet is the only way for common people to connect themselves, to circumvent the government, to make decisions about their personal autonomy. We say it's a basic human right.
We thank the member of the government, and now we invite the member of the opposition to open the second half of the opposition case.
Ladies and gentlemen, what I really want to start, the second half of the opposition case, is by clarifying what the government has to do today. Because I think it's getting lost, and I think you're actually starting to think that people have a basic human right to the internet. The government, the burden of them today is that they have to show that the internet is so unique, that the means and ways of the internet, that all the benefits that they have lauded, their whole case, cannot be accomplished any other way. And what we are going to bring you on the second opposition today is our extensions, is that in fact, there are other ways and better ways to accomplish these ends specifically within China. ladies and gentlemen, my first point today is a little bit of rebuttal. I want to do some clarification. Secondly, I'm going to get into the nature of internet in China, which is the extension that my partner and I would bring to you. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about how specifically in relation to my extension, conventional means are better within China. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about a right, but I really want to clarify what a right is. A human right is something that compromises your humanity when it's taken away. They are saying that taking away the internet compromises a person's ability to be human. No, this is not necessarily true at all. And what this really means is that if we continue censorship within China, censorship would, instead of protecting the self-interest in China, protecting the citizenry of China, would be a violation of human rights by the government of China. If nothing else, compelling external forces to take involvement in China. We would be discussing genocide and internet access in the same sentence of the UN. How ridiculous is that? It's obviously pretty ridiculous, I mean, since you all agree with me. But we're talking about someone's ability to access Facebook and videos of dogs farting in the same sentence as genocide. That doesn't seem ridiculous. Not at this time, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, the internet is convenience. Because I have a right to food, that doesn't mean that because 7-Eleven is closer than the supermarket, that 7-Eleven should be a right. The internet is a convenience at which, and a luxury at which, yes, these things can be accomplished, but no, it's not the only way. And in fact, in China, it is a disastrous and harmful way. Yes, Josh?
Right, you keep talking about alternatives. Maybe you could give us a couple so my partner can start rebutting them?
Well, I don't know, the history of human communication pre-technology, we managed it thus far. We managed communication, we managed societal mobility, we managed individual development without the internet. I think there are plenty of ways. But fundamentally, just talking conventional media, the ways that people communicate, not at this time, guys. But what I really want to get to, and I think is slowly becoming washed over in my case, is the nature of internet within China. And I want to go back to what Logan said in the beginning. He said that the internet is actually the least harmful way. It's more harmful to have someone on the street shouting hate speech and waving, I don't know, burning flags in person. When they say this stuff on the internet, it's less harmful because you're removed from it. Well, I can see that that might be true in other places. But within China, what you have to realize is that the internet is a damage multiplier. And it is the speed at which information can be disseminated and accessed that causes this damage to happen. You look at the riots in Tibet, and you look at the riots in Shenzhen region, in Xinjiang, sorry. You look at these riots, and they were exacerbated by people's ability to access the internet. People that were not there. And in fact, in most cases, people external to China. Specifically, I really want to nail this one home because I want to talk about the Tibet issue. Just one second, guys. People in the United States are constantly posting things on the internet saying, free Tibet, Tibet has the right to be free, egging people on, inciting violence inside the Tibetan region. They've never been to Tibet. They have no knowledge of what Tibet is, of the problems of Tibet, yet they are actively inciting this violence to continue. And it is the internet access, it is the free internet access that is going to exacerbate this problem should we allow it to happen. Yes?
So if we have free internet access, we can actually rebut those arguments. And there are a whole lot of people who are willing to rebut that. And what's more than that, conventional media doesn't allow us to say that. And that's a problem.
Yeah, but the problem here is the speed at which this can be disseminated. And the rebuttal and they get lost in the wash of the internet. And this is what we're talking about. The conventional means are better. Because on the internet, crazy people have an equal voice, and the fringe elements have an equal voice as the majority. I think we pretty much agree with that as government. The government would like to promote the fringe elements. We're saying that while ideas are not necessarily a bad thing, there isn't necessarily a bad idea. It is the reaction, the dissemination of that idea. Ideas that are expressed in public forum, ideas that are expressed through communication, through non-digital means, go through a process of societal peer review. This peer review allows the reaction and the virulence of these ideas to be tamped down, to be mitigated, or to be ramped up accordingly. The problem with the internet is it causes a multiplier effect. Automatically, things are at 10 when they should be at 5. the idea can disseminate through society so quickly that we have things that are happening, violence for the sake of violence. When you allow these means to be disseminated through other means, through communication, through grassroots elements, you mandate a lesser effect than, and you encourage the people who are actually interested in the expression of their ideas to exist. Yes, Logan.
If vast amounts of people are suddenly picking up on ideas on the internet, do you think they're becoming violent just because they read it on the internet? Or are they violent for some other reason, that there is some real value based on the things that they are reading off the internet?
Absolutely. I think there's a ton of violence for the sake of violence on the internet. You can't tell me that there is the wealth of ideas on the internet in one hand and say that there aren't people who, when they learn about violence, will exacerbate that violence for no other reason. When the incitement of violence, should it come to that, does not appear on the internet, it can go through a process where people actually decide if this is what they want to do, and you don't get people from external forces, and really this is even probably the biggest harm, external forces saying that this should happen, external forces with no stakeholder in the event itself. You have them inciting violence when they don't have any stake in it. They're doing it just because they can post something on a blog. Mr. Speaker, what have we brought to you today? That we've shown you that this doesn't qualify as a right. This is not a right. This is a convenience. They would like to say that this is a right because they believe in the free dissemination of ideas, but Mr. Speaker, those ideas are better disseminated through conventional means, especially in the country of China. Thank you.
We thank the member of the opposition, and now we invite the government whip to conclude and summarize the government case.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, if we say that information is dangerous, and accessing to those information on internet is dangerous for China, then we say you should not give us those kind of information and you should ban those information totally. What the opposition side is telling us is that on one hand, information is dangerous, but on the other hand, you can have all sorts of access to those information besides internet. And those access are right. Internet is wrong. Let me prove to you that their statement is wrong by telling you what is the difference of internet and conventional media when they are telling us that the counter model is having conventional media. But before we do that, let us first examine this idea of human right, ladies and gentlemen. The opposition bench today, told us that there are rights, like your right to survival, like your right to food, to water. They are your primary level right. And to quote from the closing of the opposition, they're saying that those are rights that if you don't have, you will compromise to your humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, we say internet is not a luxury. Internet is the secondary level right that we need to have, because without those rights, we are to compromise your first level right. We say in countries like the United States, where you're fighting a war in Afghanistan or Iraq, you're sending your soldiers into those countries. The people have to have full and complete information on what's going on, not now. And they need to know that so that they are 100% sure that they're making the right decision and they are not sacrificing the humanities of those soldiers that they are sending in. And when people are talking about healthcare plans and all sorts of other public policies, people need to understand that. And it is not going to be through a channel that is run by the government or have vested interest in all those issues. That's why we say that all those ideas, like having Rupert Murdoch running a Fox News, that you will take it as your source of information, is wrong.
Yeah, that's why there's free internet access in the United States. But in China, when internet access is specifically inciting violence, that's why internet access should not be free here.
Ladies and gentlemen, they're only pointing us to part of the issue. They say there are people who are saying that violence is what they want. But we say there are also another group of people who are harmed by this kind of proposal from the opposition, that they are not actually getting the right to refute and rebut the ideas from the violence that people are proposing on their side. We say, even if we consider issues like Xinjiang or consider things like Tibet, they need to understand more about all those issues, what is really happening in that area. And by understanding it, and I'm going to tell you why internet is going to provide you with those understanding, that by understanding it, they are going to be able to disseminate this information and tell us what is right and what is wrong, because that is related to their interests. Ladies and gentlemen, why internet is unique in its own right? We say internet is the first kind of media that you can get rid of editorial policies. And that is the first kind of media that you can use with anonymity. And that is the first kind of media where you generate your own content and you are actually having this kind of exchange of ideas between users on internet, rather than having a top-down approach of editors telling you what is right and what is wrong. They were saying that by having newspaper, it is correct, because newspapers and all those conventional medias have editorial board. But I've already told you that this is not the case in today's debate, because we have seen that conventional media is not providing us with a balanced view on all the issues, and only through internet, where people are exchanging their ideas and forming communities online, especially in those restrictive society, in those oppressed societies, that they can finally find their partners, they can finally find their companions, and they can be encouraged into doing what they feel that is right, and that is their absolute right, because that's only when they can fight for their right and protect their survival in those communities. Yes, Upper House.
Sir, please deal with an example that nobody on your bench has. If I have the right to know where American troops are in Iraq, and that opens American troops up to attacks by Al-Qaeda, why is that a right that you're protecting?
It is not directly showing that where your troops are marching into. It is showing the situation of what is happening. We say that there is, something as a right of national security, and we say there is, things like crimes committed, like for child pornography. We say if those are issues, that are not issues with internet itself, that are issues with the general society itself. If we say that if you're running into those kind of problems, then regulate those issues, not regulate internet. You are not telling us why internet is wrong in all those circumstances. So, ladies and gentlemen, what's the government telling you today? We say internet is an important right for everyone, because that's not only the cheapest way for you to get information, that's the only way where you can get unbiased information, because you are now enjoying this freedom of saying what you want, and you are now having this freedom of getting to know what others' opinion on everything is about, and you can freely refute the ideas that you want or want not. And at the same time, having this nature of self-censorship on internet, you can actually choose not to view what you don't want to see on internet. So basically, having this internet gives you full access to information you need in order to make public decisions for public policies and whatever issue that is related to the kind of right that the government is telling us, like rights to survival. But at the same time, we're showing you that having this kind of importance of internet, we're trying to guarantee that the government is not judging what kind of information is appropriate to everybody because of the idea that government is smarter than the general public. And we say the general public have the right to decide itself. Vote for your government. And if you're actually questioning your own foundation for your democracy, we say that it's actually not the right way for you to argue for the internet only. If you're telling us that this is a question for internet, show us why it is internet. But the government side has already shown you that we are to protect our right for accessing information on internet. Thank you very much.
We thank the government whip, and now we invite the opposition whip to conclude and summarize the opposition case and this round as a whole.
Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be the last speaker to conclude the case from the opposition bench. First, I would like to express my sincere, regretfulness for our Mr. Pettifil and Fedas. This is all brought up by the magic of internet. We're discussing the topic here, and I know they love internet as well as I do, but I still think internet is not a basic, fundamental human right. Before I move on, I would like to give 3 rebuttals to what Jimbo has just mentioned. The first one is that Jimbo seems to imagine internet is the encyclopedia of information. As long as we've got internet access, then we know everything what's happening around the world, and we can make right choices, be informed for what's the real situation in sex. I would say that's an illusion, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because media has a lot of opinions into it. It's not always subjective. For example, when I was actually in their states and there's Tibet incident happened, when I talked to people around me, well, their opinion, first of all, not this time, sorry. Not this time, sorry. Their opinion, first of all, is that Tibet is not part of China. And second is that we don't actually believe what says on Fox News or other Western medias as well, because we're actually lacking in the real access to what really happening in that region. Media is what tells you one story, but not necessarily the real reflection of what happens in that region. So it's not necessarily the approach or the most effective approach for what's happening in that area. So second of all, not this time, after my point. Second of all, they're talking about how unique it is that internet compares to conventional medias in China. Well, Nick stand up specifically telling us why in an authoritarian regime like China, conventional media is more effective and more appropriate and fits for China's situation. Let me give you another example. Is that if I analyze the situation, because in an authoritarian regime, people are very much influenced by the mainstream media, and they're very easy to be mobilized by information online that might incite potential violence that might harm society. Let me give you another example. Is that during the incident that Tibet happens, after my point, that there is a post about the supermarket Carrefour. Like people are, because Carrefour support Dalai Lama, and there's incident posted online, it was very popular, spread across China, that people should protest against the Carrefour supermarket. And that brings actually mobilizes the people to go to Carrefour and brings messy situation and harms the regular business condition in Carrefour supermarket and harms people's normal life and quality of life. We think that's potentially, there's a small case to show that internet may potentially harm and incite people's violence towards the community they live. And third of all is talking about the freedom. Full access to information is important. I'll take the opening.
After the boycott of Carrefour, when people find out what really was the real scenario of Carrefour and Dalai Lama, people go back to their home and get more mature on blind the nationalism. That's what the internet lesson can teach our citizens.
Thanks very much. I don't think actually the internet teach the citizens. It's because people realize the issue and they find it through books, through histories, through their own studies, not necessarily internet. Let me conclude. Let me make this finish my rebuttal first. And Jim also mentioned about how important it is that for people to have free access to freedom, not limit everything, free access to internet. Why? It is important. I'd like to say, I also want to clear the stand for the opposition side today, that we do not actually oppose people's right to freedom. We do not oppose people's freedom to speech. We do believe that people should have basic rights. But we do not believe internet is the ends to achieve, is the right itself. Through internet, people get more convenient ways to spread their opinion, express with others, but itself is not the right. Fundamentally, the other side needs to answer this question, well, right speaking. I'll take...
If the right to education or to form self-identity is a right, and if the society that I exist doesn't encourage those things, and internet is a unique and special way for me to develop that identity, then does the internet not then become a fundamental right?
First of all, I think it's arguably true that whether internet plays the part to define who I am. I am where I come from. I am Chinese because I'm grown up in this culture and social atmosphere, not because a means of education, say internet. It doesn't have to do with any forms of media. It's where I come from. It's a culture I bring up. As
has nothing to do with personal identity or not that influential. Okay, let me move to my conclusion from the opposition side today. I have 3 points to make. The first one is I would like to talk a bit about the nature of basic rights. The second, I would like to talk about the nature of internet, which brought about Nick, but I would like to further conclude from our side. And third is about the harm of free internet access and how the other side actually exaggerate the freedom and the benefit internet could bring to people. First, let's look at the nature of basic right. I think the opposition side today spent a lot of time talking about what benefits internet would bring, how convenient it is if we have internet in our life. Sorry, not this time. But they spend very little time or less time talking about what does it mean to be a fundamental basic right. This side of the house, we think that basic rights are those associated with people for human dignity or human existence. For example, your food, your shelter, your health, which makes it your existence, or human dignity, like your ability of privacy, your ability to be educated, generated, extended, state extension of these rights. We do not value internet as part of these very basic rights. Compared with losing my life, or losing my house, or losing my shelter or food, losing several days of internet and no internet doesn't play that fundamental role in my life. That's a question that opposition sides needs to answer today, but they fail to do this because they want to give the illusion as long as we have internet, then we have a uniqueness, unique benefit in our life to call ourselves human beings. We fundamentally disagree with that, and we think, well, secondly speaking, let's look at the nature of the internet. As we mentioned, and particularly brought up in the case, that internet is a tool. Internet is a way, is a media for us to express our opinion, is to make our voices heard in a way that is faster. It's convenient, it's luxurious, but there's no fundamental reason for us to believe why it is an indispensable part in our life, that we cannot call ourselves a human being as long as we cannot click the computer to get online. That's the case that the opposition side failed to prove to us. With that, yes. With that, I am very honored to close the case for today's debate. Thank you very much.
I thank the opposition with and all 8 debaters. I invite them to cross the floor and shake hands.
I think another round of applause is in order for the 8 debaters for doing the great job that they did. You've met some of them before, and I want to make a special thank you to Shako and to Zumbo for agreeing to join in on the demonstration debate. I think their contribution was very helpful. While they are settling back down, and in anticipation of your questions, but before